Imagine the silence of a room full of people watching you be humiliated by your own blood. The air on the high-end steakhouse was thick with the scent of expensive leather, aged wine, and burnt butter, a scent I used to associate with success, but now only reminds me of betrayal. My father stood up at his 61st birthday dinner, his silver hair gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. He clinked his crystal glass with a silver spoon, the sharp sound cutting through the low hum of elite conversation, and looked me dead in the eye with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Chloe, we all know you're just playing shop with that little website of yours," he said, his voice carrying to the neighboring tables. He told everyone that my sister, Sarah, was the real legacy of this family, and demanded I hand over my login credentials and client list before the dessert menus even arrived. He said I was going back to being her assistant because she was taking over everything I built with my own sweat and tears. Sarah just smirked, leaning back in her velvet chair, and held out her hand for my phone like she was expecting a gift. I felt the heat rising in my face and my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I couldn't even find the words to fight back against the weight of their expectations. Suddenly, a man in a sharp gray suit stood up from the next table and walked toward us, holding a thick manila folder that seemed to glow with a strange importance under the flickering candlelight. "My name is Chloe, and I'm 32 years old. I spent the last decade of my life being the reliable one, the daughter who stayed behind to fix the messes while everyone else chased the sun. I worked as a freelance web developer and social media strategist, building a boutique agency from my kitchen table, often working until the sun rose and my eyes burned from the blue light of the monitor. While I was coding and cold calling, my sister, Sarah, was traveling the world, posting photos from yachts and luxury villas, all funded by my parents' retirement and the consulting fees they pulled from the family accounts. In my family, I was never the CEO or the entrepreneur. I was just the support staff, the girl who could fix the Wi-Fi or format a document. My parents didn't see my 14-hour days, the missed meals, and the stack of coffee-stained notebooks filled with business strategies. They only saw that I didn't have a fancy corner office and a glass building like the one they eventually bought for Sarah to house her ideas. I wasn't the rich one, I wasn't the glamorous one, and I certainly wasn't the favorite child who got a standing ovation for just showing up to brunch. But while they were busy praising Sarah for visionary ideas that she actually whispered out of my mouth during dinner conversations, I was building a digital infrastructure they couldn't even begin to understand. I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom they so desperately craved to save their own failing reputation. If your family made you feel like you weren't enough, subscribe to this community. Drop your story below. You're not alone. I know exactly what it's like to work in the shadows while someone else takes the credit. Let's go. Click hype if you're ready for the truth. The evening had started with a false sense of peace, the kind of calm that usually precedes a violent storm. I had spent over $2,000 on this dinner, wanting my father to feel respected on his milestone birthday, but the investment felt like ashes in my mouth the moment he opened his mouth. Halfway through the main course, as the waiters cleared the steak bones, the mood shifted into something predatory. My dad announced to the table that Sarah's luxury lifestyle brand, which was really just a glorified blog for her vacation photos, was failing because she lacked the technical tools to scale. He didn't say she lacked work ethic or talent, he blamed the tools, and then he pointed his finger at me. He told the entire extended family, the aunts who never liked me, and the uncles who only talked about golf, that I was selfishly hoarding my business success. "Family shares everything, Chloe," he barked, his face turning a shade of red that matched his wine. Then he produced a legal document from his coat pocket, a paper a notary had actually brought to the steakhouse as if this were a boardroom and not a family dinner. He demanded I sign over my LLC to Sarah for exactly $1, claiming it was the only way to prove I actually loved this family. The peer pressure was suffocating as my own relatives began chanting, "Sign it," like it was some twisted party game, their faces blurred by the expensive candlelight into a mask of greed. The betrayal didn't stop at the dinner table. It had started days before in the quiet of my own home. I soon discovered they'd gone behind my back and told my 3 biggest clients, the ones who provided 80% of my revenue, that I was retiring due to burnout and that Sarah was taking over the accounts. They had actually used my own home computer to send those emails while I was out at the grocery store buying supplies for a family barbecue. The level of invasion was chilling. A week later, at a local business mixer where I usually found new leads, my mother pulled a group of influential investors aside and whispered that I was struggling with severe mental health issues. She told them that's why the family was stepping in to manage my affairs, effectively blackballing me from the only professional community I had. My father then took the final, most disgusting step. He threatened to cut off my grandmother's medical fund, a fund he controlled through an old trust, unless I sat down and trained Sarah on how to run my proprietary lead generation software. I felt like I was being backed into a corner with no exit. So I played the part they expected of me. I nodded, I apologized, and I agreed to the training sessions. But behind my submissive expression, I was working faster than ever. I began setting up a digital kill switch in the source code and quietly moving every single one of my actual assets, contracts, and bank balances to a new, unregistered entity that they couldn't find even if they hired a private investigator.
What they didn't know, and what their arrogance would never allow them to see, was that I wasn't just building small-scale websites for local bakeries. I was building a massive, anonymous data mining and lead generation empire under a pseudonym that was already generating 6 figures a month. I had a plan they never saw coming because they never looked close enough to see the girl behind the screen. Every time Sarah logged into my system during our training sessions to learn the ropes, she thought she was gaining power, but she was actually feeding me every bit of evidence I needed to destroy them. I had been recording every single Zoom call where they mocked my quiet nature and saving every text message where my dad and Sarah discussed bleeding my business dry once they had the passwords. They openly talked about how they planned to discard me and move me into a tiny apartment once the transition was complete, laughing about how I was too weak to ever fight back. They were handing me the rope they would eventually hang themselves with, and they were doing it with a smile. My only true ally was a man the family had forgotten. Mr. Henderson was an old family lawyer who had been fired by my father years ago because he was too ethical and refused to help my dad skirt some shady tax laws. He had been watching my family's antics from the sidelines for years and reached out to me when he saw the merger announcement on LinkedIn. He hated what they were doing to me, seeing the same patterns of abuse he had witnessed decades ago. Meanwhile, Sarah grew incredibly arrogant, acting like she had already conquered the tech world. She started buying luxury cars on credit and signing leases for offices she couldn't afford, telling everyone she was a self-made tech mogul now. The family eventually scheduled a final handover gala at the local country club to announce the merger of my thriving business into Sarah's failing brand. They thought they had already won the war. But the night before the event, Mr. Henderson met me in a dimly lit diner with a final piece of the puzzle that changed everything. Ironclad proof that my father had been embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from the very family trust he was using to threaten me and my grandmother. The Empowerment Gala was a sickening display of ego, with the country club filled with white lilies and fake smiles from people who only cared about status. My parents stood on the stage looking like royalty as my dad took the microphone to give his keynote address. He invited me on stage to officially hand over the keys to my empire in front of the local press and our entire social circle. He handed me a laptop, expecting me to type in the master password that would give Sarah everything. Instead, I bypassed the login screen and projected my damning evidence folder directly onto the giant 60-foot screens behind the stage. The room went silent as the recordings played. My dad's voice boomed through the speakers, laughing about tricking the quiet daughter and calling me a useful idiot. I stood there, calm and cool, and revealed to the stunned audience that the LLC they had just bought for $1 was nothing but an empty shell with zero value. I had moved all the contracts, the intellectual property, and the cash to my new company months ago. Just as the chaos peaked, the stranger from the steakhouse, who was actually a process server working with Mr. Henderson, walked onto the stage. He didn't say a word. He just handed my father a thick stack of legal papers, a lawsuit for embezzlement and fraud, served in front of every peer he'd ever tried to impress. I walked out of that gala without looking back once, even as the room erupted into a frenzy of whispers and camera flashes. I didn't just save my business that night, I exposed the rot that had been eating away at the core of my family for decades. The aftermath was swift and brutal, just as I had planned. Sarah's brand collapsed within a single week because she didn't even know how to log into the basic servers without me, and her creditors came knocking for the luxury cars she couldn't pay for. My father was forced into a massive legal settlement that drained his entire retirement fund just to stay out of prison. They thought they could take what I built because I was the quiet one who didn't complain. They forgot the most important rule of power. The person who builds the house from the ground up is the only one who knows exactly where the trapdoors are hidden.
Did someone try to take credit for your hard work or steal an opportunity you spent years building? It's a pain that cuts deep, especially when it's family. Tell me your story in the comments. How did you stand your ground? Subscribe to stay connected to our community of creators who won't be pushed around. Click Hype to amplify voices like yours and help this story reach someone currently being underestimated. Your story has power. If you felt a connection to mine, please subscribe and share your journey in the comments. Every hype you give this video helps empower someone else. Thank you for being here and for listening. Would you like me to write a similar outline about a hidden inheritance or a secret professional skill?